July 2nd, 1863. A Union colonel stands on a rocky hill in Pennsylvania. His men are exhausted. They've been fighting for hours, and they're nearly out of ammunition. Then the order spreads quickly down the line. Fix bayonets! The man giving that order wasn't a career soldier. He was a college professor. His name was Joshua Chamberlain. And in the next few minutes, he would make one of the most courageous decisions in American history. But the reason this story matters is not because he was fearless. It's because of what he did when fear arrived. And that lesson is one every man eventually has to learn. When we hear the word courage, most people imagine something dramatic. Battlefields, firefighters running into a burning building, a soldier charging forward under fire. But most men will never face a battlefield. The real test of courage today looks very different. It's the moment when you must speak the truth even though it may cost you something. It's standing up for your family when others remain silent. It's refusing to compromise your values when it would be easier to go along to get along. And if we're honest, many men today have never been taught what courage actually looks like. We live in a culture that prizes comfort. It teaches men to avoid risk, avoid conflict, avoid responsibility. But courage isn't the absence of fear. No, courage is the decision to act when fear is present. And few moments in history illustrate that better than what happened on a small hill called Little Round Top. On the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, Union commanders realized something dangerous. Their line had a weak point. At the far end of the Army's position stood a rocky hill called Little Round Top. If Confederate forces captured that hill, they could attack the Union Army from the side and possibly win the entire battle. So the Union Army rushed a regiment there to hold the line, the 20th Maine, led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. And Chamberlain was not a professional soldier. He had been a professor of rhetoric and languages at Bowdoin College in Maine. But when the Civil War began, he believed the cause mattered enough that he volunteered to serve. And by the time his regiment reached Little Round Top, the fighting had already been brutal. Wave after wave of Confederate soldiers attacked their position. And each assault pushed closer, and Chamberlain's men held. But the situation kept getting worse. The regiment was running dangerously low on ammunition, and the men were exhausted, and the line was thinning. And the order Chamberlain had been given was simple: hold this position at all costs. And finally, after another Confederate assault, Chamberlain received word that many of his men had only a few rounds left, and some had none. At that moment, most commanders would have prepared for the inevitable collapse. But Chamberlain made a decision. Instead of waiting to be overrun, he ordered a bayonet charge. Now imagine the moment. Exhausted soldiers nearly out of ammunition, charging downhill directly into an advancing enemy. It was a desperate gamble, but it worked. The sudden charge stunned the Confederate soldiers. The 20th Maine drove them back and captured many of them. And Little Round Top held. Historians widely believe that that moment helped secure the Union victory at Gettysburg, a battle that many consider the turning point of the entire Civil War. All because one man made a decision in a moment of pressure. And when people hear that story, they often think that Chamberlain must have been unusually brave, some kind of natural hero. But if we read his writings later in life, you'll discover something interesting. Chamberlain admitted that he felt fear. Not only fear, but deep fear. You see, he wasn't fearless. He simply believed something mattered more than his fear. And that's the real secret of courage. You see, courage is not a personality trait. It's a hierarchy of values. And fear will always exist. Every man feels it. The difference between a courageous man and a passive one is not the presence of fear. It's what sits above fear. Duty, conviction, responsibility, and faith. And when those things are stronger than fear, a man moves forward. And when they're weaker, he retreats. And this is where many men struggle today. Because if you remove higher principles from a man's life, fear becomes the loudest voice in the room. And without conviction, comfort wins, silence wins, and cowardice slowly becomes normal. And most men today will never be asked to defend a hill in battle, but every man will eventually face his own version of Little Round Top. It might come in quiet ways. The moment when a coworker asks you to bend the truth, or the moment when someone mocks your values and everyone else laughs. And when doing the right thing might cost you reputation, comfort, or opportunity. It's in those moments that courage rarely looks dramatic. It often simply looks like standing your ground, saying no, speaking honestly, or refusing to move when pressure is applied. And here's the key. You don't build courage in the moment of crisis. You build it long before the moment arrives. You see, Chamberlain didn't suddenly invent courage on that hill. His decision came from convictions he already had formed about duty, country, and responsibility. And in the same way, modern men build courage by strengthening the things that stand above fear: principles, faith, and responsibility. A man who knows what he stands for becomes very difficult to move. History remembers Joshua Chamberlain for one moment, a single command: fix bayonets. But that moment was really the result of something deeper. A man who knew what mattered, a man who understood that some things are worth standing for, even when the outcome is uncertain. Every generation of men faces its own version of that choice. Not always on battlefields, but in workplaces, in families, and in our communities. In quiet moments where character is tested. And when that moment comes, the question is always the same. Will fear decide, or will conviction? Because history shows us something again and again. The men who change the course of events are rarely the loudest. They are simply the ones who refuse to step back when it matters most. My name is Dennis Gill, and this is the Faith and Fortitude Project. I want to thank you very much for watching to the end. If you got something out of this, please consider liking and subscribing and forwarding this video on to someone you think might benefit from it. And remember, faith first and fortitude always.